What image comes to mind when I say homeless? Is it an old, single black man sitting at a bus stop? Does he just need to get a job? Is he a crazy drug user that has just been out here too long to help? And wouldn't helping him be too expensive? The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, defines homelessness as referring to households or individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. On a single night in 2016, at least 549,928 people were counted as experiencing homelessness in the United States. A majority, 68%, were staying in emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, or safe havens, and 32% were in unsheltered locations. 5,050 of those experiencing homelessness were in South Carolina, 66% of which were in emergency shelters or transitional housing. This was found during the point-in-time count, or PIT, which is an annual one-night count of both sheltered and unsheltered homeless populations taken during the last week of January each year. You may have quite a few misconceptions about homelessness. Don't worry, though, it's not all your fault. Society, the media, and our culture perpetuate many ideas of what it means to be homeless. We're here to break that down for you. Myth number 1. They're all old, single black men. In the 2016 PIT count, nearly half of all people experiencing homelessness nationally were white, 48%, and most other people experiencing homelessness were African American, 39%. In South Carolina, those numbers were 43% and 52%, respectively. However, this is disproportionate to the national distribution of race. According to HUD, in 2016, 35% of the homeless population nationally were families. Of people in families with children, 60% of those were under the age of 18. In South Carolina, 24% of the homeless population were in families, and 63% of that were children. Overall, 39.5% nationally were female, 60.2% were male, and 0.3% were transgender. That's 65% male and 35% female in South Carolina. Women were more likely to be sheltered. All of these numbers are likely undercounts because of the difficulties of counting people. Myth number 2. They just need to work. More than 32 federal government programs, including Medicaid, Head Start, and housing subsidies, are based on the official poverty threshold, which in 2014 was an income of $11,670 a year for one person, increasing with each additional person per household. So, the poverty threshold for a family of 4 would be $23,850 per year. Fair market rent is determined by HUD as what would be fair to pay for an apartment. HUD and bank lenders use the guideline that 30% of your income should be spent on housing. So by those standards, affordable rent for someone working a minimum wage job should be $377 a month for rent. But fair market rent for one-bedroom apartment in Columbia, South Carolina is $669 a month. So a person needs to make about $2,208 per month to meet the 30% HUD guideline. If they work 40 hours a week, they would need to earn $12.74 an hour to afford fair market rent. At current minimum wage, they would need to work 71 hours to afford the fair market rent. So if you work 40 hours a week at minimum wage, 53% of your income is going to housing at fair market rent, and that's only for one person. Myth number 3. They're all chronic, crazy drug users. HUD defines a chronically homeless individual as an individual with a disability who has been continuously homeless for 1 year or has experienced at least 4 episodes of homelessness in the last 3 years, where the combined length of time homeless in those occasions is at least 12 months. In 2016, only 15.7% of homeless individuals were chronically homeless, 20% in South Carolina. 17% were chronic substance abusers, nationally and in South Carolina. Nationally, 19.6% reported severe mental illness compared to 14% in South Carolina. In comparison, only 6% of Americans suffer from severe mental illness. Although chronic, drug-abusing, and mentally ill people make up less than a quarter of the population experiencing homelessness, they are the most visible and vulnerable, and therefore become our stereotype for homelessness. Myth number 4. Solving homelessness would be too expensive. In fact, leaving things how they are now costs the country millions of dollars. Hospitalizations, medical treatment, incarceration, police intervention, and emergency shelter expenses add up quickly. Homelessness both causes and results from serious healthcare issues, including addiction, psychological disorders, and HIV/AIDS, which require long term and consistent care. Without housing stability, people are less likely to get regular medical attention, gain access to treatment, or recover quickly. Without treatment, these issues become more dangerous and costly. According to one study in LA, home to 10% of the entire homeless population, placing just 4 chronically homeless people into permanent supportive housing saved the city more than $80,000 per year. In South Carolina, just 20 chronic homeless people were responsible for 161 arrests at a cost of $27 per encounter, 1,794 nights in jail at $70 per night, numerous hours of prosecutor's time worth about $9,000, numerous emergency room visits costing about $1.8 million. A chronically homeless person typically visits local hospitals multiple times a year, costing an average of $89,000 a year per person. This all totals to be approximately $1.9 million. Multiple studies have shown major cost savings on emergency services and shelter programs through Housing First development, up to $30,000 per person. The outlook can seem rather bleak, but all hope is not lost. There are some big agencies working nationally to advocate for and support homeless individuals, like National Alliance to End Homelessness and National Coalition for the Homeless, as well as lots of groups doing good in their communities, such as in Columbia, South Carolina, where places like Transitions, Oliver Gospel Mission, Food Not Bombs, Palmetto Place, Mercy, Homeless No More, Killingsworth, and many others are working to make Columbia, South Carolina better. So, what can you do? There's always the basics: volunteer at a soup kitchen or shelter. But beyond that, contact your local, state, and national legislators to advocate for bills supporting homeless services and affordable housing. Educate yourself and your friends on what homelessness really is. And most importantly, remember that people experiencing homelessness are just that: people.